Welcome back to the show, everybody. My name is Vandell, and today we have a very special guest with us joining us. That's Waters Above, who specializes in decoding the financial markets with a very strong focus on cryptocurrencies, digital assets, and blockchain, as it plays a critical role in reshaping the global financial system. He actually breaks down why the markets move the way they do, why they do what they do, and he shares his very unique investing system and integrates numerology, astrology, and some other techniques. I'm very happy to have him on the show today. Thank you for joining us, Waters Above. Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited to connect. It's been a while, I believe, that I've had people in my community reaching out saying, you got to talk with this guy, you got to connect with them. And yeah, man, I'm just glad to connect finally and make this happen on a very special day, too, this total lunar eclipse happening.
Yes, exactly. And it's actually something I wanted to ask you about, and we'll get more into the details on that topic, specifically how you use it to really look and identify where we are in the markets, in the market cycles, and what these digital assets are doing. I'll start here first. So just a broad perspective for the audience, but on the market cycles and cryptocurrency in general, where do you see us at the moment in the cycle?
I think we're in a very expensive territory across the board for a lot of things. I think we're in like the peak of speculation, but I don't think we're quite there yet at like euphoria just yet, especially with cryptocurrency. I think that that might be the case for most of the stock market, but I don't really think that's the case just yet for a majority of the altcoins. Perhaps that's just starting to become the flavor of things like Ethereum or like Binance Coin, but not yet the broad altcoin market that most of us are invested in. So I think that we're, if I could summarize it into a simple statement, we're at the beginning of the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I absolutely agree with you, actually. What's interesting is, as you know, the crypto market in general, specifically Bitcoin and the broader crypto market, follows this debt refinance cycle. And what's interesting is we're actually getting to the late phases of the debt refinance cycle, which coincides with the liquidity cycle. So we certainly are getting towards the end, but we're not fully at the peak in that maximum euphoria phase just yet. So I do agree with that. But it's interesting to see how it plays out now, because there are so many, you could say, analysts and people in the space, crypto Twitter, and individuals that are saying this time is completely different. And that's something I want to bring to your attention and ask you about, because I think there are some parallels here, but at the same time, there are just a few differences as well. What do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? What do you think?
Yeah, if we're going to isolate it from talking about crypto cycles in particular, like from this cycle to the 2021 cycle or the 2017 or perhaps 2013, 2014, there are a lot of similarities in my opinion. I think we're about pretty much right on track regarding the Bitcoin conversation. I think that this cycle in regards to altcoins is much more like 2017 into the very well, I can't even call it 2018 because the majority of those alts peaked in like the first 2 weeks of the calendar year. So let's just call it the end of 2017. I feel like we're in a very similar position when you look back at September 2017, for example. Even this pullback that we're getting, in general, it looks just like the pullback in September of 2021 too, before Bitcoin kind of reached its final move of that double top, what ended up becoming a double top. But the big difference right now is obviously we haven't had that big expansion in the altcoins, that final release of FOMO that we usually see. And I do believe we got a little bit of a taste of it back leading up to Trump's inauguration, like from his election victory through inauguration. It was pretty much what we typically see in the earlier stages of what we call an alt season, but we haven't seen a lot of these alts go into price discovery, including things like XRP, which is a huge focus for my channel. So I think that we are similar in ways to 2018 regarding the alts. I think, though, we are doing the same thing we always do with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a lot more predictable, actually, in that way, where it's just back at its 4 year cycle, same kind of energy, overextended, probably a little bit more to go to the upside, but not too much more, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
In general, I think we do have a couple big differences though, which is like a lot of institutional involvement, and we don't have as much meme euphoria and things like NFTs. I think that played a huge role. You know, DeFi played a huge role in the last cycle. It didn't, those two things that I just said did not play a role at all in the 2017 cycle, right? So there will always be these little nuances. And I guess the last thing to say is back in 2017, we had Trump's first term, but he wasn't considered like this crypto president. But today we have like a crypto administration. And we've even seen these changes happening on the SEC level as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think generally there's a lot of similarities, but there will always be slight differences because there needs to be. I think the market maker needs to do what they do to confuse as many people as possible. And everybody wants to time the market and predict the market cycles. So if it was that easy to just copy and paste what has happened before, I think we would all be much more successful as investors, and we wouldn't be so quick to panic sell or to FOMO into early pumps, etc. I hope I answered your question with that.
Yeah, it's actually a very good answer. I actually tend to agree. I do see a lot of similar dynamics to previous cycles in terms of capital rotation, the dynamics between, capital flooding into Bitcoin, then slightly leaving, moving into Ethereum. And as a matter of fact, you're seeing a lot of similar things we did see in the previous cycles, such as huge rotation from Bitcoin into Ethereum. For example, just recently in the past few weeks, big whale or a few whales dumping close to $500 million and rotating that into Ethereum. And it looks like Ethereum hit a resistance point and kind of retested. And I think that's a similar movement we did see in a previous cycle before the next leg up.
You're right. Yeah, you're definitely right. And it's a typical thing we see with alts where they retest prior cycle peaks and then they get a rejection. And I was just telling my community this past weekend on my Red Pill podcast that I do, back then it was like a 35% correction for Ethereum after it hit prior all-time highs from 2018, from the early 2018 top. This time it's only been like a 25% or something. So yeah, I mean, it's still pretty damn close when you're looking at it from that perspective, and I 100% agree.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is you did say there are some differences, and I also agree with you here. For example, the administration kind of backing crypto and institutional involvement, institutional capital kind of sitting behind a lot of these big cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum maybe. But I don't think that changes the human behavior psychology dynamic that usually reflects in the market from a greed and fear perspective. Because, regardless if it's retail or institutions, at the end of the day, it's governed by people.
Yeah.
People will be people. So I think as long as there's human behavior that's part of this game, you're always going to see those moments of maximum greed and euphoria and severe, panic and fear.
Yeah.
I just think that hasn't happened yet, the parabolic move, but I think it's coming very soon. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that you put that kind of background to what I was saying earlier because it's very important for people to remember. And I guess this is where my work comes into play as well with what you said at the institutional level and the fact that people are people and the retail investors or everybody involved in this game is just humans with human emotions. I say this all the time, that humans are just skeletons with emotions, And so you're right. And now the thing is like, why are humans emotional? Why are they acting the way they act during certain times of year or during, certain times of their life? And this comes back to like what I specialize in with applying this astrology layer or a gematria or numerology layer. And it's quite fascinating when you start to involve these systems, why you see we get these cyclical crashes that happen in the global financial system, or why we have the change of power regarding so we could get quite deep into this if you'd like, but maybe let's take it slow because I know we're pretty early on today's chat, so I'll pump the brakes. But
No,
you were
it's okay.
asking you were asking about
these are important conversations, I think, but go ahead. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. You were asking about my thoughts regarding the next leg up being probably a FOMO euphoria style parabola that we typically see at the end of a market cycle. And I think actually, and this might pique your interest and probably something you're already aware of, but I think gold is actually showing us that. And gold in all past cycles for Bitcoin and and when we have our true alt seasons, it's pretty much bang on what we're seeing right now in gold. This euphoria hitting gold in what's considered to be quite a boring asset for the most part pretty much aligns perfectly with what we saw back in 2020 into 2021, as well as what we saw in 2017, and as well as what we saw in 2013. And funny enough, in every single example of those three cycles, it was always happening in either late August or early September. And here we are in early September, and we have gold, in my opinion, and I'm not going to say this to like hurt anyone's feelings, but in my opinion, gold is getting expensive now, and just for the moment. I think gold will hit 4,000 and go much higher, in my opinion, over the long term. But for now, it's been like a little too fun to be a gold investor. And the market maker has this way with things where they use certain times of year to, I don't want to use the word manipulate loosely, but they use certain times of year to like ritualize what assets do what. Just like Mother Nature has its own way of producing certain types of fruits or vegetables at certain times of year. It operates just like that. So we're about to have a harvest, in my opinion, and it's perfectly in alignment with the month of the harvest, which is September. Or in the Hebrew calendar, they have their new year, which is called Rosh Hashanah. And this is a very important Hebrew New Year that's coming up later this month, around September 22nd through 24th, because it will be happening during a partial solar eclipse. So this will be very symbolic, in my opinion. And that's why I think gold will top in this month. And then we will probably see a correction in gold through December into a holiday called Saturnalia. And Saturnalia is pretty much what became Christmas. So I'll save it and we can maybe break apart some of these concepts one by one if you'd like. But we saw the same move from September to December back in 2020 into 2021. We also saw the same move for gold back in 2017, September to December. And we also saw the same thing happen in 2013. Whilst gold was experiencing a 9 to 19% correction in those three iterations, we were seeing Bitcoin hit its blow off top cycle peak, and we saw alt season. So I think this is like kind of the perfect moment to get prepared emotionally for this next euphoric phase. I think it's coming very soon.
Yeah, I do agree with you. What's interesting, Waters, is that a lot of the work I do is very macro focused. I'm looking at I use a variety of different indicators, basket of different metrics, and investment proprietary data. And what I'm looking at is, for example, the stage is being set. And when you really zoom out, you could see it aligned with the work that you're doing. So, for example, gold tends to lead during this time. It actually leads, interestingly. And another factor that's important is the copper to gold ratio. What's interesting historically, every time the copper to gold ratio was performing well, this actually aligned with an expansion in the crypto market, in Bitcoin and altcoins later. And what's interesting is the copper to gold ratio is actually underperforming, so it's down now. And it actually coincides with, of course, the business cycle as well as the Russell 2000 too. The Russell 2000. And the interesting thing between all of these is we look at them from this isolated perspective, but they're all connected because they're considered risk on. And when the copper to gold ratio is performing well, it's basically like a confidence gouge in the health of the economy. And I think that reflects in risk on markets. So they coincide, and it's fascinating because right now they're all kind of sitting, even the business cycle, in that contraction phase before they usually tend to go in, afterwards they're supposed to go into an expansion phase later on. So it looks like we're just preparing and the setup is being staged for that next leg up.
Yep. 100%. And this is interesting because what I just mentioned moments ago about gold, I wish I put more care into last year, even though I did my final gold purchases, funny enough, like the week before the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or no, sorry, before the event that happened in Israel. So that was pretty much like a V-shaped recovery out of that exact date. And it was interesting because at the time I was seeing a lot of weird action on the gold chart where it was just perpetually selling off day after day after day, which we don't normally see. And then boom, we have this event in Israel. And then we see a V-shaped recovery and it's been going up to all-time highs since. So I find that very fascinating too. Also, the timing of the year that it happened on, it coincided with the end of the Hebrew New Year. So,
Interesting.
yeah, we
Really?
could, yes, it was on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and the whole structure of this 50 number being a part of this con a part of this whole event was 50 is the Jubilee number, and they just finished up their Jubilee year. So
Fascinating.
if I was to break down the maths of this, we have every 7 years there's a year dedicated to an agricultural pause that they do in Judaism. And effectively, it's every 7 years. It's called the Shemitah. And in the Shemitah, they're supposed to not deal with the lands in the same way that they would normally deal with the lands in the other years. Then we have 7 cycles of 7 Shemitah years, which is 49 years. And then on the 50th year, the following year, they practice something called Biblical Jubilee. So Biblical Jubilee was the following year after our bear market. So
Interesting.
we had the last Shemitah, funny enough, it was from Rosh Hashanah of 2021 to Rosh Hashanah 2022, and then from effectively the September timeframe of 2022 till September, I think it was very early October actually, because Rosh Hashanah is changing with the moon cycles. Their whole calendrical system is not fixed like the Gregorian system that we're using
Okay.
in America, for example. So, long story short, imagine it was just from September 2020, all of the end of 2023, and then yeah, the rest is history. And it's really fascinating how they organized that whole thing to happen at that exact time. Whether people believe it's, chaos or not, I don't. I think everything in this reality is scripted, and I think the people who control this world stage are ritualizing every single thing that happens. Just like 9/11 happened in a Shemitah year, just like the
Yeah.
housing market crisis happened in a Shemitah year. So it's very cyclical in that way when we're seeing these big events that collapse markets. And the good thing about having this knowledge is that you could position yourself accordingly. So it's absolutely amazing when you look at the NASDAQ on Rosh Hashanah at the end of the Shemitah that just happened in 2022. It was the absolute bottom.
Interesting.
So if you just bought the Hebrew New Year, you would have been in the lowest possible position and you could have just held till today and you'd see how high up you are in your portfolio. It's absolutely mind blowing. So we don't have another one of those until 2028, which is a big part of my investment thesis in like the macro sense, because once you are looking at how you can time these big swings, you could really position yourself effectively for things like what will housing be like at a certain time, or what will, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but these 7 year cycles are massive. They're so important. And in the last crypto cycle that we just had in 2021, we were dealing with that energy. And that's why I believe we had the C19 event right before it. It was the ritual. And then during the midst of it, we see what the markets did. And the Fed did what they wanted to do because they have no masters. So this was all just to create the problem we're dealing with today. But the people who are the smartest people in the room, you invested and positioned yourself. And hopefully when this market gets euphoric, you'll be the last or one of the people that doesn't have to deal with the musical chairs game, being without a seat to sit in. Because
Yeah,
I think
because
the
that will
next
happen.
crash is going to be the next crash. I think is going to be pretty rough.
I
I
do
don't
agree with
think.
you.
Yeah, I don't think the Fed's going to come in to save the day on that one.
But you really don't think so?
Well, I mean, I think there's ways that they can talk the talk, but I think ultimately, like, it will be a very interesting collapse because they need to usher in this blockchain.
System.
I call it the Aquarian economy. They need to usher in this blockchain-based reality for everybody. And in a world of AI and artificial intelligence and humanoid robots, like that's their vision. That's their
Yes.
wet dream. So
Yeah.
blockchain plays a huge role in it. And in order to make it happen, well, they need chaos brings order, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think by having this quote unquote crypto president and crypto administration and getting the whole world to like be all eyes on crypto right now, it's kind of a planned, organized.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the end game. They have a twisted vision and they want to bring it to reality. This has been in the plan since the 1960s, the trilateral agreement. Now they actually have the technology to roll it out, not just to roll it out, to enforce it. And they
Right.
have the ability to manipulate information to the highest degree. So, yeah,
And it's like all these people that are getting excited about like this Genius Act and all this shit. I'm like, did you read what that's about, dude?
I actually
Like,
did, but you're right. You're right.
yeah, like once you actually look into what this stuff is, you wake up very quickly. Like you see it from a different perspective and you have to realize what this is all about. So, I mean, but I gotta admit, I'm very optimistic in many ways because I've known about these things for enough time now to prepare myself. And I think the solution to all of these quote unquote problems is like be a creator, like gain skills, because then you'll be useful to other people. And in the world that we're moving into, you'll need some skills, in my opinion.
I
And
agree. You're right.
one of the skills could be something like programming AI. I don't know. Maybe that won't even be necessary because I've heard some wild stuff coming from Sam Altman and like their grand vision for what AI will be and how easy the utility will be is pretty crazy. So who knows what programmers will be doing once they roll out that part of their master plan. But anyways, getting back on track, like I'm super optimistic about however this goes because I assume as long as there's people like you and I that are not worried about sharing our thoughts on this, you know, we're not worried about this information being gate kept, and I guess there's some courage there and bravery in some capacity, you know, then I think people will find it, the right people, the people who need to find it, and it will do its own ripple effect, and it'll be good. It'll be exactly what needs to happen. Just like with C19, I think a lot of people woke up for the first time and they started to see things weren't as they were told and hopefully took action, gained some skills. And then now here we are 5 years later, which is crazy to say, but here we are 5 years later.
I know, time flies.
And hopefully you evolved as a human being. And I hope the same in the next 5 years. There's nothing that anybody here should be complaining about or worried about. Just take action and do something about it. You know, that's,
I agree.
and
I do.
I guess the final thing I'll say on this is the biggest worry that I have in my work, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is like so many people think they'll just get rich in this bull run and then their life problems will be solved. And I warn people how dangerous that mentality is. Because if you just put a bunch of extra, you know, zeros at the end of the number in your bank account, that doesn't give you any skills. That doesn't make you less depressed. That doesn't really change much about your character. If anything, it just amplifies it. And I wish more people would talk about that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And in addition to that, I feel like making it, you know, as you know, everybody's a genius in a bull market, okay?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have to know when to pull the trigger and how to navigate at some point later on because you got to take action. You really do. And I think the more challenging part to that is keeping what you make at the end of the day. But I do absolutely agree with you. I talk a lot about, not too often on camera, but about ikigai, you know, finding your purpose. And I think, yeah, too many people are chasing the digits, the numbers, the fancy cars, the fancy things. But at the end of the day, the truth is, and I'll tell you this from experience, none of that will make you happy after a certain period of time. What will make you happy is fulfillment in what you're doing, purpose. So chase purpose, you know. That's what I have to say every single time. That's how you find happiness. It's by chasing purpose, not chasing numbers and shiny things and money. And at the end of the day, the money is to give you the things you actually want in life, whether it's freedom, you know, more time. And we all want what money can buy us, but you certainly want to have the things that money can't buy, you know?
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are avoiding putting in the work and avoiding developing skills right now because they're just riding on this bull run thing. And yeah, man,
That's
I can't
dangerous.
exactly. And it's funny, like I had more fun, I think, in the bear market last cycle because I just created so many things. You know, like I didn't concern myself on bull run bear market bullshit. And I think we're coming close to a time where these big euphoric crazy ROI bull runs in crypto are not going to be a thing of the future. in my opinion. I don't think
Yeah,
we're
I
going to
agree.
have these again. So that's why I'm trying to speak these words early. I know they're not sexy. Like, nobody wants to hear anybody say this. Like, don't worry, guys. You will probably see 800, 900, maybe 1,000% moves in some of these, altcoins you hold. But to depend on that and then make that your whole essence could really destroy your beingness in every day leading up to that moment. And also, I can guarantee you, when those moments do come, when you're at 800% up on one of your investments, you're probably going to be the same person that's saying, oh, it's going to go up higher, it's going to go up higher. And then you never even take any profits because you don't have an exit strategy, right? So these are all critical things. Navigating a cycle is so much more about having a plan and executing that plan. And
I
in the
agree
meantime,
100%.
yeah, and in the meantime, just work on yourself as a human being and put your, I call it prana, like your life force energy, like put your life force energy into the stuff that actually matters. Because I've seen these things destroy people. And this cycle feels very weird, right? Where we have so much more knowledge and information now. 2020, it didn't feel like there was as much knowledge, and clearly not YouTubers or people on social media, right? It was kind of like the most fun time in a way to consume crypto content. Now it's just really all about like when's the next 100x meme coin bullshit, right? And it's distracting people from getting into like what I would call generational wealth planning, like
Yeah.
planning beyond just the immediate 2 hour, shit coin that gets uploaded onto some Solana blockchain thing. So this is a very interesting cycle in that way where I think it's quite important to talk about these things and to not be so in the future and to not be in this waiting game. This perpetual waiting game is really rough for most people.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. And what you said is extremely important. And I always reiterate this and try to emphasize this point. If you don't have an exit strategy or a plan in any investment you make, then you're going to face some serious challenges. You really are. And, as much as I'm a believer in some of these digital assets, primarily the protocols and the blockchain technologies, because I see that they're going to be a part of the new system. I believe they are, some of them. I still think that you have to consider opportunity cost. And you have to have a plan to just, ride it out without taking any profits or without selling is very personal. And, some people do want to do that. They want to ride the whole thing out, watch it fall down 80, 90%,
Yeah.
wait for things to kind of change over the next 5, 10 years. That's okay. But people need to really ask themselves, what's your why? Why are you doing this? What personal financial goals do you have, short term, medium term, long term, and kind of assess your personal situation. And I always tell people there's only two reasons to ever sell. First of all, you lost conviction in your investment, get rid of it. Second reason is you need the money. So for whatever reason, personal situations, you want to put your kids in private school, pay off your debt, move to a new country, give yourself a better life, retire. You have to have a plan and you have to be able to pull the trigger when the time comes. And as you said, if you don't have a strategy, then you're going to be in a bad situation.
100%.
Yeah. So since the cycles there are some differences and a lot of similarities we're seeing from a dynamic perspective. My question is, how are you integrating a lot of the work you do into where we are right now, and how are you going to use that to kind of exit the market at some point? I'm going to assume that you plan on selling or de-risking at some point a
Yeah.
percentage of your portfolio. Is that correct?
Yeah, and to be honest, like the last cycle, I sold about 80% of my altcoins, and I'm glad that I did.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm probably like in the same position this cycle, and you brought up something that I agree with, but I'll add a little bit to this two reasons to sell thing, and one of them is like you lost conviction in your investment, and what I'll add on to it is like if you have the skill to analyze when an asset is overbought, like when it's very, very expensive, then that's also something that could be incredibly useful for that individual. And something that I think could help a lot of people, and something that people disregarded quite a bit in 2020 into 2021, when we were seeing things just go up 100,000%. And navigating that move was insanely difficult. But funny enough, when you just look at a couple of indicators on macro charts, you can see this 90 RSI, for example, relative strength index indicator. That's probably a good time to get out of something. And it's a very dangerous time to believe it'll keep going. So I think that there's only a couple of things that are needed to help people to make those calls. But I do agree with you in the way that it's maybe not best to be postured in like shit coins that you're only getting in for the ROI and you're only getting in because they go up, you know? Like you should actually be investing in things that you know about, that you've done some research into, that you know what the company's plans are into the future, etc. And although when it comes to crypto, we experience the dot-com bubble a couple of times a year, let alone at once in a lifetime. You know, I mean, look at this, what is it called? Trump token. It's already down 87%. I mean, that's what the dot-com bubble did.
It
And
was a
it's,
rug pull.
yeah, it was exactly. But it's funny because when I stated that it was a rug pull initially, the day after it launched, I had even popular technical analysts
You did?
call, yes. And I did it. It actually released on the day that I made a podcast for my community. I do a weekly podcast on Sundays. And then we had his meme coin launch on that Sunday. And then Monday rolled around. Tuesday, he gets elected, etc. Anyways, the point that I'm making is we need to also assess that a lot of this stuff is just absolute fairy dust, and there's nothing wrong with taking maybe an hour or two out of your day to learn how to use a couple indicators on these charts and understand how they move. You know, I think it could be incredibly beneficial. Very similar to like if you wanted to visit a new city and you only had 3 days and you had to take a walk from where your hotel is located to somewhere else, it would be really smart to like plan out where's the cafe on the walk to the next destination, or where's a restaurant you could stop and get lunch at. You know, you take that extra bit of time to just plan. It makes your day a lot more efficient. I feel like there's probably the same application here in crypto, where there's a very actually easy way to check in on when things are a little too hot. And number one is when everyone's talking about it, when it's really popular. And anyways, getting back to the question,
Yeah,
I plan to sell most of my crypto because I've been through this before and I know how to sell. I know I've taken the time to, and I'm not saying this guys as a flex or like anything like that. I've literally spent 16 to 18 hours on the charts every single day for about 1.5 years straight till I got to the point where I knew the ins and outs of everything. And then I created my own system that I use for my TA. So I'm not telling anyone here to go through that. I could save you a lot of time and just talk about 2 or 3 different indicators that you can use in the end of a cycle. And I even admitted a little bit earlier, I wish I knew about one of them, which was what we were talking about with gold, or perhaps what we could talk about with the Russell, or even something like just like the DXY, you know, or Bitcoin dominance, for example. So many altcoin holders could benefit greatly by just understanding what Bitcoin dominance is doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, so my exit plan is I think we're going to go through another one of those crashes, but I don't think we're going to go through it for Bitcoin. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Bitcoin maxi or anything like that. I actually hold more XRP than I hold Bitcoin, but I think that Bitcoin is now in a state where it's going to be very similar to the Apple chart after we had the dot-com bubble, and the 2022 bear market was the dot-com bubble for Bitcoin. So we had that major capitulate. It was like a 77% crash, but since it's recovered and we've only been experiencing 30 to 40% corrections over and over and over again, we've yet to experience something more than that. And I'm thinking that the correction that we had in May of 2021 is going to be like the bear market that Bitcoin experiences in 2026. It's only going to be like a 50 to 60% max. I do not think Bitcoin's going to go through that 80 to 90% correction ever again. But I do think Bitcoin going through that 50 to 60% correction could easily wipe out a lot of the altcoins. And just look at what we've seen recently. We've seen 80 to 90% corrections while Bitcoin just keeps going up and up and up. So yeah, it's like swallowing everything. It's stealing everything in a way. And I don't even feel so good about ETH in the next bear market. I'd be de-risking or taking profits on most of that too.
Yeah, personally, well, I do agree with you. I do think that, well, you know, ever since 2009, financial markets have been primarily driven by liquidity. There was a point in time where it was the real economy that dictated the state of the financial markets, but it's changed and it's primarily driven by liquidity. And what's interesting is any time there is systemic risk or uncertainty, liquidity begins to drain from the financial markets. You see a contraction. It actually follows this debt refinance cycle, which is 4 to 5 years, and liquidity follows that. So every time liquidity is contracted, you see a lot of these risk-on assets take a hit. Now, the thing with crypto is it's primarily driven by liquidity, and it's actually the most sensitive risk-on asset to liquidity. So when liquidity is drained, which I think will happen at some point because nothing goes up forever. That's how the liquidity cycles operate. They move in cycles, and everything's cyclical to some extent, not just nature and organisms, but the financial markets. I think Bitcoin will take a serious hit. Personally, I do agree with you that I don't think it would be, I think it could not, I think it's more probable from a probabilistic perspective that it could be between 50, 40, 60% maybe 70%, but I don't think it would be 90% personally.
Right. Yeah, that was the idea, is like the having an 80 something percent correction back in 2018, 19 was sure a big hit, right? But like when we're looking at today's market cap, a 50% correction is a huge hit. And it's a huge hit to people that can't deal with such a big hit. So I think we're talking about a different animal this time, and I think there's so much garbage in this market. Like you could just load up CoinMarketCap and read the number of altcoins that are existing. I think that's all going to get swallowed up by Bitcoin on the next bear market, and we won't see as drastic of a correction. But then also we have to account for the stable coins. That's another part of the conversation too, which I know you're very well versed in. I actually watched that video that you put out when you released it on stable coins, by the way. But yeah, so this next cycle, I think altcoins are going to get smashed, and I think it would be irresponsible for me to hold them, especially because, and maybe you'll resonate with this, but like I have so many big vision things that I want to create and implement with my current business. And as of this year, just back in January, I created technically a new business, my university. And that's not so focused on cryptocurrency. And I'm trying to teach people how to create businesses, and I'm trying to teach people how to become entrepreneurs and how to free themselves in that way. So I'm going to continue to evolve, and I don't want to be stuck in this vice grip of like waiting 3 or 4 years to change my life. Like I just want to always continue to create, always continue to bring value to the people who resonate with my art. And yeah, so with whenever the next bear market comes, I would just rather get out of this fairy dust casino and pour this money into something that I believe will be more in alignment with where I'm at as an individual.
Yeah, more sustainable too.
And like you said, it's a plan. I have a plan. I have an exit strategy, and I have a plan. I know what I want to do with my life, and I'm not relying on the bull run actually. So if we get it, great. If we get these, let's rewind what I just said. Like you're probably a long-term XRP investor too, and just in my investments of this last bear market, my XRP play is up 600 or 700% or whatever. And there's people that are complaining that they want more. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on, dude? Are we that like disease? Are we that sick in the head that we always want more, more, more? And then it's like, well, Waters, you said it would go to $10, or you said it would go to $15. And I'm like, it's never enough. If we hit 10, you would want 1,000. It's never enough. If this move didn't change your life in some capacity, then nothing will change your life, because you're not ready to accept that these things can't change your life.
Yeah, you make a very valid point. You do.
Yeah. So I don't live my life and set up my future plans by this bull run exit strategy thing either. If we get it, amazing. I'll be a stoic profit taker, and I will leave the casino early, And that's, I think, the best way to do it in this game, because we can see some crazy things happen in a blow off top. Last cycle, we saw assets lose 60% of their value 1 week after they topped. And most of that 60% was happening in the first 4-hour candle. Like, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And you won't know until you live through it, right? So if you're somebody who's listening that was in the last cycle, words of wisdom, have a plan, and also don't plan your whole life and future around some incoming bull run. I'm not doing it. I did do it back in the last cycle, and funny enough, whenever I did take profits, people would get mad at me and say you sold early or whatever. And I'm like, there is no early selling. You made money in a game where 95% of people lose money.
Very good point. It's true.
It's never enough, though. It's never enough. So I've kind of become numb to all of this. And I think, in a way, that's probably the best way to navigate crypto. Just save your emotions for real life, is what I say.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Absolutely. It will maintain your sanity as well.
Facts.
As you said, more than 90% lose money in this space. And I don't see that changing, to be honest. It's like it's natural selection here. It's a game, yeah. And if you don't understand how the market makers operate, how market dynamics work, and if you don't understand the financial markets, you're going to get wrecked. And I got to tell you, Waters, I'm a long-term investor. It's in my nature. I'm always thinking, down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And digital assets are no different. I feel like there's a few digital assets here that will play a critical role in the future because of certain specific use cases. And I'd like to maintain exposure to those for the long term. But initially, my plan is, and I've shared this in my private group as well, to take between 60 to even 80% off the table. Mm-hmm. Once I see my indicators, on-chain metrics, flashing red. Basically, I'm doing what you do in a different way, but I'm going to check the temperature. And once things start looking really frothy and hot, that's a signal that the next phase is going to be a downturn. But I still think that point is coming, and we're not there yet. But it's critical. People need to have a plan. I do think this is going to be a severe crash, especially in altcoins. Yep. I mean, even the ones with utility and use cases. And I want to get your opinion on this, Waters.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, every bull run cycle, the big financial institutions, the hedge funds, what's interesting is you see huge marketing campaigns and narratives pushed out leading up to the blow off top. I think this is by design. Well, I know it's by design, but what's your take on that? How do you see the narrative element coming into the equation and, telling them this is the next big thing. It's here to stay. This is going to change the world. I mean, all this stuff.
Yeah. I remember it vividly in the last cycle. Like, there would be a big UFC fight and it was like sponsored by crypto.com. Like there was all that going on, billboards all over the place. I gotta admit, I say this all the time when people ask me questions about what I think is going on in the world, and I tell them I'm like Patrick Starr, like I'm like living under a rock. Like I honestly try to almost avoid most of the noise. Like I try to be pure signal, and that's actually quite difficult in my position because people rely on me on a weekly basis to provide some insights about the market and what I see coming. So I try to like open up my aperture for just the least amount of noise as possible to that, like Pareto's principle, like an 80-20 rule. Like give me the 20% of the most important noise so that I can understand the other 80% and be somewhat competent before I share my thoughts. But like I don't even know where we are in this cycle regarding retail. I feel like this you're gonna laugh, but like I feel like this Hawk Tua meme coin thing and that whole saga and like the Trump coin, Melania coin thing, that was like really kind of end of bull market vibes. Like if you think about it, right? Like if we go back to how it felt in 2021, that was the type of shit that would have happened in 2021. So in a way, that's very awkward how we had that.
Strange.
It's very strange. So far, that marked the top on a lot of things. But recently we've had ETH go up and basically press up against prior all-time highs. We've had Binance coin. So we're seeing these major projects looking pretty damn good. But if you look at the XRP chart and you go back to this Hawk Tua coin bullshit, that's pretty much the top. If you look at Doge or a lot of these big players, a lot of big projects by market cap, you're going to see the same. So very fascinating how we haven't, in my opinion, and my ignorance, because I don't know as much as maybe you know about the quote unquote temperature of the room here, but we don't really have a thing like
it.
Okay, that's good. So me and you would get along. But yeah, like I don't know if we have an FTX this time around. I don't know if we have. Oh, I'll say this, but this is not answering your question. But I think Michael Saylor's probably going to get ritualized this year or sometime soon, and that will probably be the end of the end of the bull run will be a Michael Saylor thing. And when I say ritualized, I don't mean he's going to get killed. I just mean
I know what you mean.
Some big thing regarding him will probably be the perfect scapegoat technology to place blame on, like he's the reason, right? Anywho, that's just a side thought. But as of right now, I don't know. I think the last local experience that I have where I felt that weirdness of like popularity was this Hawk Tuah, was the Trump meme coin. What else? It was all going on around that same time. Like every influencer, popular streamers, they were all making their own meme coin and it was all pump and dumps. So, in a way, I think that was like
Those are
not.
signs that end
Yeah,
of a
those are
bull
signs.
market usually.
Yeah, those are signs, man. And yeah, so I haven't experienced anything like that since. Have you? Has anything come up in your world where you're like, "Oh, this kind of tastes like 2020 or 2017 or whatever regarding the end?"
Well, specifically those events that took place,
Yeah.
that really stood out to me. But what's interesting is on the other side of the spectrum, a lot of the macro factors that are usually aligned and in place during those most euphoric phases, those macro factors have not lined up yet. And that's the interesting part because crypto is a macro asset as of now. It's treated as a risk on. It moves based on liquidity. Liquidity's pumping, asset, crypto pumps, liquidity's contracted, crypto dumps. And it kind of, a lot of the macroeconomic factors that usually align, that lead up to a massive parabolic altcoin season, have not fallen into place yet. And that's really the strange thing here, and I think I know why. It's because from a macro perspective, in 2022, they raised rates that directly impacts the economy, which impacts the liquidity in risk on assets. And since they kept rates higher for longer, it basically extended the business cycle. Now, when it extended the business cycle, that directly impacts risk on appetite, growth expectations, the real state of the economy, and there isn't a lot of liquidity. Even though liquidity is increasing as I'm monitoring it, there isn't enough liquidity making its way into the crypto market from retail. And that's because the business cycle is still in its contraction phase. So essentially, there are a few elements here that haven't lined up properly to really support that explosive season. That's what it looks like. So I think it's coming. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the setups that have historically led to that parabolic phase are falling into place. The setup, the stage is being set. For example, the rate cuts coming. Usually this is one of the first signs before they weaken the dollar and
Right.
inject more liquidity into the system. Whatever narratives they say, whether it's rooted in truth or not, most of it is lies anyway. But there are some elements to it that actually are part of the plan. You could say for the market makers, for the financial elites, but for example, they want a weak dollar. What's interesting is historically every weakest point of the dollar coincided with the peak of Bitcoin. It's fascinating, but it makes sense. And they want a weak dollar. So I think they're going to weaken the dollar, cut interest rates, stimulate, refinance the debt, roll it over. In order to refinance the debt, they need a substantial amount of liquidity to do that. And they have to refinance the debt. So they need liquidity. If they don't refinance the debt, they only have two other options. Pay off the debt, which is impossible, or the other option is basically default. Let
Yeah.
the system collapse. So I don't know. We'll have to see.
Do you expect rate cuts in this upcoming FOMC?
Yeah, for a long time I've been saying what the Fed does is they're wanting weak economic data, because when they have weak economic data, whether it's from the labor market, unemployment, all this stuff, now they have an excuse to cut rates. They always need a cover to justify their actions.
Yep.
But their cover lines up perfectly with their plans, their unspoken plans, which is to refinance the debt. They have to do it. And I think that's where stablecoins comes in to help them do that as well. But yeah, I think they're going to cut rates. They might not even do it in September, although I think they will. But they might not do it in September to create uncertainty. They play games all the time. So that's possible. But I still think there will be multiple rate cuts going towards the end of the year. And I think it's going to inject a lot of liquidity into the system. That will make its way into risk on crypto. And I think there will be narratives around that in some shape or form to fuel the fire with retail hopping in. How do you see that happening? How do you see that playing out? The last stages of the year.
Yeah, I know that there's 3 meetings ahead, September, October, and December. I believe there's one in early December, and everything that I've been like doing in my own work behind the scenes has been trying to determine like when Bitcoin's top would be. And there's a relationship between Bitcoin with the lunar cycles. And if you go back to the past, every single all-time high for Bitcoin was around a new moon. So we had around the new moon of November 2021, around the new moon of December 2017, and around the new moon of December 2013. And we're talking within like a 24 to 48 hour window on those last two examples.
That's incredible. Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah. And the bottom of the bear market in November 2022 for Bitcoin was a total lunar eclipse. We also have eclipses were pretty symbolic in the last bear market, where we had the total lunar eclipse in May of 2022. And that was the Terra Luna event, where their stablecoin depegged. And we saw what happened with Do Kwon and all of that shit. And that was literally on a lunar eclipse. Terra Luna collapsed.
Yeah, it's hidden in plain sight almost. If you
And
know where to
then
look.
the following lunar eclipse in November 2022 was the FTX event and Sam Bankman-Fried and everything that happened with that. It was literally within 48 hours of a lunar eclipse. Anyways, this is a big part of my work. So if anyone's interested in that, definitely check out the channel. But coming back to answering your question, I feel that there's going to be something to how they're going to use the rate, like the exoteric conversation of the rate cuts and what I'm calling like this cage match between Powell and Trump, and how they're going to play it on the world stage and how they're going to align it with the November new moon or the December new moon. But for me, I'm feeling like I've looked back at so much data, and what makes this a little bit of a wild card for me is bringing in the Chinese zodiac system, which is another element maybe I didn't talk about yet today. But if we go back to 1964, that was the year of the dragon, but it was the exact type of year of dragon. It was the wood dragon. So there's these elemental signs as well, which rotate along with every 12 years. We revisit the sign in Chinese New Year, the Chinese zodiac. So we had the dragon year last year, but it coincided with 1964 because that was the last year of the wood dragon. Okay.
I see.
I actually used this information to decode Trump winning the presidency because Kamala Harris, funny enough, was born in 1964. She was born in the year of the wood dragon, and look at how she was ritualized to be put in that position for that exact election.
Fascinating.
So it's kind of interesting how these things have come into play, and I do a lot of decodes using the Chinese zodiac because of over the past 4 years, I've found so many mind-blowing connections that are just undeniable. And what's really interesting about 1964 with the S&P 500 chart, it is nearly identical to what we had happen last year in 2024 on the S&P 500. So I said to myself, well, they're in the system, the dragon and the snake, which is the year we're in now, the year of the snake, are very close in that they're both reptilian, serpent-like. Like they have a similar essence. You know, we're not comparing like a horse and a gorilla. We're comparing something that has the very similar essence, and then they follow each other up. So I thought to myself, let's look at 1965, the last year of... Actually, can I show you this stuff if I just share my screen?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I feel like I might be confusing people, actually, by talking about it.
No, let's do it. Okay.
Let me know if you could see my chart.
I can see your chart. Yep. Okay.
Okay, well, this is unscripted, so I'm going to do my best to explain this to everybody without being confusing. But I want to show people something that will blow their minds. So we all recently went through this crash. Don't worry, I'm going to show you the 1965 connection in a moment. We had the all-time high at the time in the S&P 500 on February 19th. Then we go to the bottom, and you'll see 47 days later, we crashed and bottomed into April 7th, the 4-7 date. Who's the 47th president of the United States? Donald Trump. Who caused this crash? Allegedly, Donald Trump. So we have 47 days after the all-time high, we hit the bottom of the crash on April 7th, the 4-7 date caused by the 47th president. And guess where Bitcoin hit on this exact day? $74,000. The mirror
Way coincidence. That's
Right.
not coincidence, yeah.
Well, you want your mind blown even more. Let's go back to 1965, the same year. So this would be the year of the snake, the wood snake. The last year of the wood snake was 1965. We're right here. Now look at this. We have the low right here. Let me turn off this noise. 47 days from top, we crash into the exact bottom. You can't make this up. And then look at what we do, how we recover from it. And guess where we recover to? eclipse season. So look at how we're trading at all-time highs at the time, getting a little chop, but we're there, into this annular eclipse, an eclipse. Now let's go to today really quickly. I'm going to load up where we are in the S&P. And you're going to see
a ritual taking place.
Yeah. You see, we're doing the same thing. We had a huge V-shaped recovery, and then we went up higher, and then we start to see some of this chop, just like we did back here. Now, what's fascinating is when we get the correction, the final low of the year landed on Rosh Hashanah, so the Hebrew New Year. Now, this is where this could be fascinating for people who are listening to us, because Rosh Hashanah, I told you earlier, the Hebrew New Year will be on September 22nd through September 24th this year. Oh, excuse me. Actually, I'm taking this back. I want to focus on eclipses because that's actually something that I think makes a little bit more sense, and we don't need to talk about a whole other calendrical system. Apologies. So we see that this top comes in, and then the bottom that we're getting is somewhere placed in the month of December. So this could confuse people a little bit, but what I'm feeling is this might have everything to do with the upcoming FOMC, where what you said before, maybe they don't give us rates and we have this weird correction because everybody's like scared or whatever, you know? But then it's just a false move, and we actually do push a little bit higher. Now, this comes back to what I started answering a little bit earlier, because if you see where we went up till, it was right there pretty much at the Chinese New Year. We had a micro double top, but without getting technical, let's just say on Chinese New Year, if you sold everything, you were really fucking smart, because look at what came next. You crashed all the way until which funny enough, remember before I was talking about the Shemitah year?
Yeah.
The 7-year cycle? Well, all the red boxes are 7-year cycles. I want to show you something. Look at how we topped in January at the beginning of the red box, and then we bottomed at the end of the red box. That would be the end of the Shemitah year. Now let me show you the last time we had a Shemitah. You'll see it was this red box. We topped in January and we bottomed right around the end of the red box. We've been going up since. So there's different calendrical systems that you could utilize that could help people with determining how markets are going to move. But I know I jumped around a lot, and I'm sorry, but this is excellent. It's just to answer this idea that in January or February, we could still be hitting new all-time highs for the traditional markets. And that, of course, would make sense for crypto. And it would sort of feel like 2021 in that way, where remember we had ETH finally catching up to all-time highs at the end of the year. And then we were already looking amazing on a lot of other altcoins. We're not seeing that right now. We're just seeing it's like the Bitcoin show, and it's fun to be in ETH, and all the XRP investors forgot that they're up 700%, and it's kind of boring, right? And look at this correction that we get until the final move up. That's what I think we're either completing as we speak, and this is coming, but it's going to be a weird grind, and that's going to be very elusive for stock holders, for people that are in the stock market. And we might make it up to Chinese New Year, which, by the way, will be February on a annular solar eclipse. So we have a very powerful Chinese New Year coming up, the year of the horse, because it'll be happening on an eclipse. I think that's very symbolic as well. The fact that we're ending our eclipse season this year with the Hebrew New Year, and then we're starting the next Chinese New Year with an eclipse as well. That's a big energetic vortex that I think will catch a lot of people off guard. And perhaps that'll be the type of confusion that's needed for the market makers to trap people in at the top.
Yeah. Extremely fascinating. This is really remarkable. So, you know what's interesting? Regarding your point on the FOMC meeting in September, in some of my macro analysis, what I did is I took the global liquidity index, offset it by about 11 or 10 weeks forward.
Yep.
What's interesting is if crypto or Bitcoin specifically is following it to a T, directionally speaking, what's interesting is you see a pretty steep downward trend before it goes back up. And that steep downward trend, if you move liquidity 11 weeks ahead, lands in September. So that's one reason for a while I've been calling for a September correction. Now, of course, there's no guarantee, but what's interesting is it lines up with the FOMC meeting around that time. So what that could possibly mean, I'm not saying this is the case for sure, but there could be some unexpected event from who knows, whatever. It could be the Fed that creates this uncertainty in the market to justify the correction. But in reality, the liquidity is telling us that in advance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I think that they need to do something really elusive in this particular September FOMC because it's just been so ongoing. Like it's getting boring. I don't even want to talk about FOMC or the Fed anymore. You know, like because everyone keeps coming up to me asking my thoughts, and I actually asked you because like I feel like I'll get something sophisticated on the other end, and it's I'm actually glad the way you answered because you're using some critical thinking and you're not going with what the herd is assuming, you know, and just including that little piece where you're saying, well, they might not cut rates. That I vibe with because it's not something I'm predicting. It's more that like at this rate, why the fuck not? Right? Like why not? Like why not? Why do they need to? Coming back to economic data, none of that is real. It's all make believe. Where would you back test the information as its truth anyways? Where do you go to get the truth if the person who prints the money out of thin air is the one giving you the data?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're using flawed metrics to begin with.
Precisely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at this point, what I'm kind of imagining is that we have this major CME gap on Bitcoin up to 117K. I'll quickly pull it up. And this is like just me as an analyst thinking, like how could they do how could they do something that's like really tricky? And it would be this. So we're looking at the weekly chart. I drew this out for my community. It's not perfect. It's not me trying to say that we'll perfectly come up till September 22nd. But the idea of the pivot dates has everything to do with the way that I think this FOMC will go, where we are likely going to go up into it. And then perhaps we get through the weekly close, like September 19th. Everything is feeling really good. And then that's actually like turns out to be like a sell the news type vibe. And then Rosh Hashanah, we get a sell-off. And we get a sell-off from the new moon, which is on the 21st, 22nd. It's a partial solar eclipse. And then maybe it bottoms in like the first couple days of October or like the first week of October. It makes everyone feel like shit. And then that's the launch pad. I just drew it as higher lows because I think Bitcoin in general looks pretty strong right now. Like if I zoom out, this looks amazing. The fact that if I hold my cursor here horizontally, we had this weird M pattern that broke down into a 30% correction or so. And then we've since been back testing it. That's what you kind of want to see as a technical analyst. You want to see a back test of previous resistance to confirm it as a support. And that's what we just got into the end of August. So we did get that correction into September, like you were saying. It's just it came in very rapidly with this move into the last couple days of August. And I wouldn't be shocked if we had a similar repeat about how this month will go, where some mid-month, like around the middle of the month, good vibes, and then lots of liquidation rituals happening to seal the deal on the month. And they'll use the FOMC as the main tool in their toolbox because that's what they always do.
Yeah, Waters, that's exactly what I was thinking. I believe that the market makers are going to attempt to liquidate as many longs as they can. I think they're going to catch a lot of people off guard because going into that, the general sentiment, the general consensus is we're just going higher. So what you're going to see is a lot of over-optimism, a lot of leverage on the long side. And I think this will be their opportunity to shake out a lot of people and liquidate billions. So we'll have to see, but that's what it looks like because they're so nefarious in their tricks. I could absolutely see that happening.
Yeah, it's eclipse season right now. And like what I've seen in my work is that the 3 weeks before an eclipse and the 3 weeks after an eclipse can be incredibly difficult to navigate. And what we just saw was 3 weeks of correction into this eclipse, which is effectively yesterday and today. And of course, we had a little bit of a weekend pop up, but like in general, We're now just seeing things stabilize, and we'll see how the next 3 weeks goes, but that leads you into the end of the month. So it'll all be within this calendar month. And I feel that when I go back and look at all the eclipses and how they affected the Bitcoin chart specifically, we see that it's like the following full moon after eclipse season or the following new moon after eclipse season, depending on what we're dealing with. Because sometimes we have full moon in the beginning of the month, sometimes the end, sometimes the middle. Again, these things are changing. They're not fixed like your months are. So, in order to understand what I'm saying, you just load up a lunar calendar and look at it month by month, and you'll see that October's full moon in 2025 is different from October's full moon in 2024, etc. And it'll continue to change because it's not fixed. So, the next full moon, to keep everything in plain English, will be October 6th. So I feel that after October 6th, we should start to see whatever the hell we were just dealing with this correction for Bitcoin and a lot of the altcoins. It should be mostly fully recovered and stabilized, and then we could continue to keep it moving. And I suspect that will align with the final FOMC. So there will probably be something similar to what happened in late August. Remember at Jackson Hole? Where everyone was getting sucked in because they were like, oh, we're definitely getting rate cuts. And then we've seen the correction pretty much since then, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't shock me if we had something like that happen in like early October, but it's actually a positive effect. Like it's like, oh, we're feeling good about whatever this news they float out is. And that means early October and late September, later this month, is definitely liquidation ritual vibes. I'm basically just agreeing with what you're saying. And guys, trust me, like I would love for this market to just J curve to Valhalla. You know, like I want this cycle to be fucking over with. Like it's boring at this point. Trust me, I get it. So when you're hearing about these things, some people are like, maybe your community, I'm not sure, but in general, most crypto people want to get rich yesterday. So when they're hearing about this stuff, it's very discouraging that it's like, oh, another month or oh, another month. But you got to understand, like these elites that run the markets, they have centuries of planning ahead. Like you might be planning 1 or 2 years ahead. They're planning fucking 400 years ahead. So you have to understand like the beast that you're up against here. Like you have a water gun and they are a dragon that breathes fire. So understand that these people have all the time in the world. So for you to wait a couple months, or if everything starts to be more cyclically like how it was in 2020 to 2021, where we got that crazy alt expansion from like December through March, that would be in the cards as well. And I was just sharing some of my thoughts on that a little bit earlier with the year of the horse. How we have February 16th, we have a total solar eclipse, or an annular solar eclipse actually. And we have in 1966, the market was topping at the very beginning of the year. Just like in 2021, we saw in 2022, we saw the S&P 500, I believe the NASDAQ, they were just topping in like January. And then everything slid from there. So we can see this bleed over into the next calendar year with regards to the actual top. And that might be for reasons just for like, deferring additional tax year, that kind of stuff, I mean, that'd be great. I kind of wish they would hold off till 2026 for taking profits after January. For my business structure, I think that'd be awesome. I would love to take my profits at 26.
It would be beneficial for sure.
Yeah, it'd be beneficial from that perspective. But in general, though, I don't see it lasting much longer than Q1 2026. I'm believing, if we had to talk about my statement from earlier when I said it's the beginning of the end, I would say the end should be noticeable by the end of 2026. And I don't feel good about the second half of 2026. So this is the profit-taking phase from...
I agree.
When we get the FOMC or the rate cuts, whatever bullshit they need to tell the public, and when things start getting a little frothy, as you mentioned earlier. Yeah, but I believe that will be before March 2026.
Yeah, so do you think it's possible there? So I was looking at two potential outcomes based on the macro data and the way things are unfolding. One outcome is this repeats the traditional 4-year cycle in Bitcoin and crypto. Well, Bitcoin tops out somewhere in... who knows, maybe October, November, and then altcoins follow after Bitcoin dominance starts to drop. And I think this ends probably this year. And the other The other potential outcome is it actually takes longer than we expect and it goes into Q1 2026. So it's kind of difficult, I think, to say which route it's going to go right now because it's all about the sequence of events and how they're playing out in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yep. I think it's the same conversation that was being had in September 2020. Like it's the almost identical conversation that anybody who is at this level that was really like curious but also specializing in some of this information. They, of course, nobody can perfectly predict anything, so we're doing our best with the available ingredients to cook this meal. But in September 2020, I remember vividly, we had a big correction and everyone in the majority was freaking out. Even like top crypto analysts at the time were getting a little worried because it was feeling quote unquote late in the cycle. So to get a correction late in the cycle, especially we had the global lockdown, all the fuckery going on with that, it made sense why people would feel nervous. It made sense why people would start to get a little worried. But funny enough, very similar thing happened last year in crypto, and it also happened in 2023. Where we had a September correction, October stabilized, November through December looked amazing. So the question is though, is when will that finally be the case for this typical alt season that we get? Well, in the last cycle, when we were looking back at September 2020, most people didn't imagine that the alts would go up all the way until April or May of 2021. That was very difficult to assume that that could occur. Now, and it did. And one piece of information that I've learned since my experience in these cycles and what I specialize in is it had everything to do with eclipses. And I'll pull up my chart real quick and I'll show you what the hell all of that means.
Yeah, let's see it.
So we're going to look at Bitcoin.
I just want to add to what you said. What's so interesting is this aligns perfectly with the macro data that support that explosive altcoin season. That's something that's so fascinating here because it just lines up perfectly. The same thing happened in 2017 and 2021, where when I say the macro data, I'm referring to the Russell 2000 breaking out, hitting price discovery. That was the same time altcoin season really took effect. The business cycle was in its expansion phase, so above 50. It's just fascinating. The copper to gold ratio was outperforming. Those all coincided with altcoin season, which happens to be the same times that you're looking at here on the calendar.
Yeah, I went ahead and I just drew an arrow here for everybody for September 2020 so you can understand what I was talking about, where we see Bitcoin had this rise into July and then we got choppy and then we hit this is going to blow people's minds because it's like so wild how similar it's been. We hit a high right over here August 17th, August 18th, and it looked like we just reversed all the gains from the prior day. So let me just show you real quick what we're dealing with locally. So you can see, of course, we went up through July, and then we have this, like, it's fucked up, but I call it the Twin Towers candle. But this is the structure that we got, August 13th, August 14th, and it's nearly identical to the same thing that we had back then. And then we get a notable correction. And then you'll see right around September 7th, September 8th, that's today, 2025. You see us going up into the middle of the month, and then that timing aligns perfectly with like what we're about to experience with the FOMC in regards to the dates. And then we get a little bit of a correction into the end of the month, chop, and then it's like after October 6th or 7th, we get expansion, like actual expansion.
Yeah.
And this is quite interesting how everything played out regarding the eclipses. So here on this chart, I'll quickly show your audience. This is probably something like to clip out and play at the beginning because it could provide a lot of context, but I went out of my way to track every solar and lunar cycle, which within them have powerful solar eclipses or powerful lunar eclipses. The green box is powerful solar eclipses, and when we have all of our bull runs, the red box is all of the powerful lunar eclipses where we have our bear markets. Also, it always corresponds with our bottoms in the lunar cycles or our tops in the solar cycles. The crazy thing about Bitcoin is that by the time we make it to the final solar eclipse of the solar cycle, we're at a notable all-time high. So we can see this so that would be your final solar eclipse of the solar cycle. We're hitting an all-time high. Then there's your bear market. Then we recover into the green box. There's your final solar eclipse of the solar cycle. You hit a top, and then we enter a bear market, starting on a total lunar eclipse. Here we have the same thing. The one weird part was this crazy crash that we got, this V-shape recovery. And now we're talking about this May total lunar eclipse in 2021 that ended the alt season. Because very few altcoins went higher after this. Of course, a couple did, but a majority of them were done by that time. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
Bitcoin went on to have a 56% correction, and then all it really did was a double top. There was a couple of projects that did well here. I would say the best project that performed here out of the big cap altcoins was Solana, which for anybody who knows about mythology, Sol is, well, even if you speak Spanish, it means sun. So the one coin that's associated with the sun is doing very well during a lunar cycle. Anyways, just like we had Terra Luna collapse on a lunar eclipse right here. Very fascinating how they played that whole thing. But here's where we would be with the dates. I don't think that's where we are with the energetics though. Now, in our last cycle, we did something that was quite fascinating where we actually went up again, bullish, into the second lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. As you can see over here, that was not the case. We were already in a confirmed bear market. You go back to the prior cycle, clearly not the case. We were in a confirmed bear market. Now, we've done this already where we see that we went up bullish into about a week before or so the second lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. And with this knowledge, I actually created something called a crypto decoding blueprint, which covered this. And it was part of my analysis that I would anticipate we do the same thing for this cycle. So we've had a bottom over here. That was when Bitcoin was 15K on the total lunar eclipse and the last lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. We've recovered. And you'll see that every eclipse is a notable pivot. Here, we pivoted bullish. Here, we pivoted bearish. Here, we pivoted bullish. And then you'll see we did top before the start of the red box, just like we did over here. So look over here, look over here. Same shit. Because our biggest correction in the biggest correction we've had in this whole cycle was the recent one. And it was on the start of our lunar cycle. So we've also just done something. Yeah, we've also just done something we did in the last cycle where Bitcoin hit a new all-time high right before the second lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle, which would be right here. So I want you to look there and I want you to look there. And I have it pretty well color-coded. So you can see we did the same thing before. Now what we hope doesn't happen is this bear market right now. But the reason why I'm believing we're not ready for that yet is because when we went on this whole move over here, we already completed an alt season. We already seen that changeover in gold where gold topped out and then it had a major correction. And we see all of that aligned with everything else that you explained earlier. So we have yet to have that happen in gold. You are talking about the business cycle. You're talking about what's going on in the macro side of the conversation. And that's why I'm feeling that in this cycle, we will go past this eclipse. We will actually top in the typical November, December, perhaps even January timeframe. And you see this red line here is about like where I'm calling it close to, it's a little late. So until we get there, of course, this is theoretical. But if Bitcoin were to make a new all-time high after this eclipse, and it was to do it in the month of late October, then we would have a very predictable asset because it's pretty much doing the same shit every 4 years. And what's really positive to hear for everybody, but not so positive for altcoin holders, is we're about to have the shortest lunar cycle since 2019, right over here. Now, why I'm saying altcoin holders, it's going to be rough because the shorter the lunar cycle is, the more violent and the more devastating it could be, not just for crypto, but for world events. Because I've taken some time to do this with the S&P 500 and just track it. It's tough to make these charts manually. I had to make this myself. So, everyone's like, where can I add this indicator? I'm like, it's not an indicator. I had to make this fucking thing. But anyways, I hope this helps people visually understand the power of eclipses and what we're pressing up against. And I think the next big correction in Bitcoin will be like this one. It will not be this one. It will be this one. But it will do the same thing it did to altcoins this time. The same thing, where we have our alt season here. And we could very well be in the process of this whole move here for the alts. And that could take us into January, perhaps February. I'm not sure about March, though.
Yeah, I agree with you. What's interesting is, let's see here. This is an incredible chart. Extremely clean. Gosh, this is remarkable information.
Yeah, I actually
Really is.
I made a whole presentation in like a breakdown of 5 or 6 different videos inside of this crypto decoding blueprint that is available at watersabove.com. And I feel like that alone is like a game changer for people to help them navigating cycles from a different outlook, because you could have just disregarded all the FOMC, all the Donald Trump getting elected, like all of that shit, because I released it back in June of 2024, before Trump won the election, before he was inaugurated. And I stated that you have to just pay attention to eclipses. Those are all your major pivots. So I believe that the Federal Reserve sets up their FOMC dates according to astrology. It's not random. And it's so funny to me how they choose Wednesday to be the day that Powell speaks, because to help people understand the nomenclature, the naming system behind everything, we have Wednesday is miércoles in Spanish. It's the day of Mercury. Mercury is the god of fiat money, he is the trickster. He is the god of deceit. He is the messenger also, the messenger god. So everything about Mercury is tied to the Federal Reserve. If you look at the symbolism of Mercury, it's the eagle. That's why Mercury wears the winged hat and the winged shoes, the talaria. So everything in this reality is symbolism. And once you see symbolism, you can start to decode why certain things are the way they are. So everything about the corporation of the United States of America is mercurial. It uses the eagle. The eagle is a symbol of deceit, okay, of trickery. And I'm not saying that eagles are bad animals or any of that. I'm just speaking of what
Symbolism.
their symbolic meaning, but also they're messengers, okay? But they do as they're told by their master. So this is very fascinating to understand the breakdown here. And to finish off this kind of stream of consciousness and this concept, inside of that crypto decoding blueprint, where I go over this lunar cycle chart and this eclipse cycle chart, I break down the mythology behind all the cryptocurrencies. So out of everything I just explained about Mercury, it's the messenger. It's the fastest planet. It deals with fiat money. This sounds exactly like XRP. So XRP, in my opinion, is symbolic of Mercury or Hermes. Bitcoin is symbolic of its own thing. Solana is symbolic of its own thing. And when you start to see where all of this stuff aligns, it will help you understand why certain assets do very well and why certain assets don't, or why certain people on the world stage become extremely popular at certain times and why they have a downfall. It's all using this kind of system that I've been integrating into my work, which has been really exciting actually, because I'm bored when I listen to economic data or whatever CPI or PPI. Like, that shit's boring to me. I rather actually know the truth about why these things are the way they are. So yeah, this chart that I just shared with you, I actually gave everyone a full overview. You're pretty much getting 80% of what it's about. And the next eclipse that we'll have in February 2016, that's the big one to watch out for, where we could have a very pivotal event or experience or something that'll change in energy, and that'll probably be where we go into this quote unquote bear market for crypto.
Yeah, I think those charts are absolutely fascinating. I think the work you do is incredible. It's really something else out of this world. Something that I would personally like to learn a bit more about. I mean, I've known for a long time there's a lot of rituals behind pretty much everything these elites do. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. But it's interesting because I believe this could tell you so much and give you such a different perspective on how to navigate the markets in conjunction with other tools such as the technicals, the macro work, and this pretty much gives you the whole picture here at this point. I do want to say, I think the bear market, personally, I think one of these treasury companies will be the reason it will blow up, and I think it would create a ripple effect in the market, taking us into a bear market. I'm not sure if it would be strategy, but we're seeing a similar pattern during the dot-com bubble, where you have over-investment, over-leverage, over-hype, and that's a bubble. And every bubble pops at some point, and they're going to have to, it's probably going to be one of these treasury companies that are over-leveraged. I think that will be the excuse. Or they could blame me on something else, but that's actually a very high probability at this point.
Yeah, I think Sailor's going to be a part of this whole thing. Just because I don't know if I could share this part of my screen. 1 second. Can you see this tab?
Yes.
Okay. You see, it says expect a St. Michael ritual this year. So it has everything to do with his birth year. So he was born in
Interesting.
1965. And remember, all earlier I was talking about the year of the snake in 1965 and how that's the year of the wood snake. And I showed you the S&P 500 chart.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah, the
this
dates are
is
saying he's coming down,
yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
essentially.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how they could very well make this a reality. And it's hard for me to say, but yeah, this was quite interesting that back in the year 2000, during that year of the snake, by the way, his company lost 99.99, well, the stock price crashed
Yeah,
99.99%.
yeah, that happened.
So yeah, there's something to this with this guy and why they're using him
Yeah,
the way
he's
they're
been
using him.
chosen. Yeah, he's been chosen for sure, for a specific reason. Yeah. Yeah, well, if the bear market, when the bear market comes, I think it is coming. I think we're going to have an explosive blow off top before the bear market comes, of course. But I do think people definitely need to have a strategy, an exit plan, and really got to dial down on that because if you don't, you're going to be left holding the bag and you're going to take substantial losses because I think this bear market is going to be pretty rough, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we're heading into something that'll be a very confusing thing, but it's no different than the last couple cycles. And hopefully, people get some clarity with work that you're doing, with the work that I'm doing. I'm trying to be much more focused on other things, though. I gotta admit, like when it comes to what I'm doing with my university and my plans that I have there, I think it's all about doing something bigger than just waiting around for, bull run bear market stuff. And I addressed that earlier, and I'm going to continue to be very like serious about that moving forward because that's been my message since I started my channel in 2021. I think it's hard to say those things when we're in euphoria, right? And now that we're here, it's like so boring and so like really really rough for the average investor to navigate this stuff even in the event when they're up a lot, like I was making that joke before about XRP, where people are up 600 700% and they're upset. Like it's definitely been a motivator for me to put more energy into the now moment, be present, build, and whatever happens happens. And I'm looking forward to this next bear market. I'm stoked.
Yeah.
I'm trying to embrace it like, Warren Buffett style. Like, I think it's very much where the best opportunities are. And what I would actually like, and maybe this sounds kind of evil, but like, I wish most of this stuff would go away. With all of this nonsense, with no utility, it's just clogging up the system. Yeah, everything that's happened with Solana, very similar to what happened with Ethereum back in 2020 into 2021. It just doesn't make the space look sophisticated. It makes it still look like a big joke. And at this point, I think we're at a point of no return because the powers that be have sunk their talents so deep into it with these ETFs and BlackRock and now with Trump and his administration. And you have like, Trump's son telling you to buy the dip on Twitter. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? It's so bizarre
It is
that
bizarre.
it's making me feel like, ugh, like it's just leaving a bad taste in my mouth. And I can make my own assumptions and theories about how the next 3 or 4 or 5 years will go. But I do feel that there will be a much different cycle ahead of us. And the gift that we have in front of us is like, don't fuck this one up, because
Yeah, you're right.
the next one might be worse with navigating what are the right projects to be in. And that's how this one's felt, right? It's been pretty much if you were early in Solana, you were a legend. If you've been holding a majority Bitcoin, you're feeling pretty good. If you bought the bear market and things like XRP or H bar, it's been all right. I mean, compared to a majority of the conversation, but a lot of stuff that was just introduced in 2020 or 2021 is still down 95% to this day.
Yeah, a lot of them are.
A
Yeah,
lot of them are.
yeah, yeah.
So
I
I
think
think it's, yeah, I was just going to wrap that up by saying that does make it a little different than 2020, 2021, where like it was like monkeys playing darts. You could have just put money in anything and it all rose together because of what the Fed was doing. That hasn't felt that way this time around. And that's why I'm cautioning about thinking it'll be easier next cycle. I don't, unless you really do your research and know what you're putting your money into.
yeah, I totally agree with you. And I always tell people you have to, if you're going to invest in this space, you have to have some rationale behind, some fundamental rationale behind what you're investing in. It has to have some long-term growth potential, some utility or use case. I mean, it has to. And it's not always about what you buy, it's also when you buy, which is even more important. And I think that's the key here to navigating this space, because honestly, I think most of these cryptos are going to go away in the future. Just like we saw during the dot-com bubble, they're going to have to wipe out the space, clean it up, and then you're going to have a select few that will survive, thrive, and those will be the real winners when the time comes. But yeah, well, we'll just have to see. But man, this has been a very good conversation. Yeah, excellent work you're doing, Waters.
That really means a lot to me, brother. I appreciate you.
No, really.
And I'm looking forward to having you on as a special guest in our university. I think they'll get a ton of value from that. So looking forward to asking you some questions about what you have going on in your world and picking your brain more too.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. This has been an absolute pleasure. I think your work is remarkable. I think it could play such a critical role in somebody's strategy for navigating the financial markets. Absolutely amazing stuff. I'm going to list all your information in the description of the video so people could reach out, join your university, get in touch with you. And I really hope we could do this again where you come back on the channel. But I'm still looking forward to coming on yours in the near future. So.
Yeah, man, 100%. We could definitely recap. I think it would be fun for us to get back together sometime after this FOMC and see how that shakes out.
We will. We'll have to. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you, Waters Above, for coming on. It's been great speaking with you, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Brother, I appreciate you.